Hey everybody, this is Ryan, and welcome to another episode of Terraria Interviews, and today I am lucky enough to be joined by Topazg. Say hey, Topazg.
Hey Dan.
Alright, so you created the Toparia mod, which is, it's incredibly unique. It's a lot different from the T-config stuff. And so, what was it about Terraria that made you want to make this mod?
I think really, I've played Terraria since basically the beta, and it's been something I've always found interesting as a concept, a kind of 2D sort of platform game where you've got sort of this open sandbox thing, random world generation. I'm a big fan of random generation of all kinds, so I sat there playing it and I sort of got more and more into it up to probably end game play. And as I always do with games that I get into, I sat there thinking, well, I'm really enjoying it, but what's missing? You know, from my point of view, there's something that's just not quite there in the vanilla experience. And I figured one of the biggest things is, even though there's replayability, because you've got all this randomness going on, there's not much difference. Every time you play it, you basically do the same thing, you craft the same stuff in the same order, you kill the same bosses, you go through to the end, and you've done it again. It's a bit different because the caves were different, but basically you're playing the same game. So I thought, well, the first thing I want to do, because I wanted to learn a programming language, and I figured that C# was a good one to start with because there's quite a lot of jobs at the moment looking for C#, is I thought, well, I'll do a mod for Terraria and I'll bring in some classes and see how it goes. And it sort of, it went from there. I never really expected it to be a popular mod or have anyone really sort of interested in it carrying on, but it went from one stage to the next and ended up sort of roughly where it is now.
So did you have modding experience before you tackled this?
Not really. I mean, I do my professional work doing sort of web application design and databases and things. So I'd got a background in scripting and sort of basic programming. Mod-wise, I've been sort of hacking around with games ever since the days when I sort of first started doing it with roguelikes back in sort of the Angband days. I don't know if anyone's even familiar with that, but it's late 80s, early 90s game. So I've sort of hacked around. I've never really tried to do a mod properly before this one, but it seemed like a good opportunity to start. So,
would you like to try to explain a little bit how the leveling system works?
Yeah, I mean, my idea has always been that if you want to be, say, a sword fighter or something, then use swords lots, you'll get better at it. So I tried to build a system that encouraged use of the sorts of weapons you wanted to be, and the more you used them and the harder monsters you fought using them, the stronger you got at those skills. Then the class idea was in to make sure that some players could naturally get extremely good at one thing, but at the cost of not being very good at the others. So you ended up with sort of multi-class roles that were quite good at more than one thing, and specialist roles that got pretty much overpowered in one thing but were rubbish at everything else. The idea being is that actually it starts to become viable, you know, to play through with a melee character only or a ranged character only, and you're almost encouraged to stick to those weapon types because they're the ones you end up doing far more damage with. From there, it really turned into how can you make the classes more interesting. So when your melee skill or whatever reaches a certain value, I actually used values of 10, so the skill ranges from 0 to 50, but every 10 levels you gain extra skills that you can purchase the components for and, you know, build together, just because that's part of what makes Terraria fun, that give you extra bonuses. Like the sort of the top level mage one is he can turn on a gravitation potion effect whenever he likes and things. The idea again being separate the characters out, so you end up with characters having to be played a certain way to get the most out of them.
How did you go about coming up with the different skills?
Waved my finger in the air and guessed as to what sounded interesting and vaguely class relevant, I think. I mean, to some extent, some of the skills sort of make sense. If you're going to play a ninja type class, you want things like movement speed, jump height. I think they get double jump at a higher level from memory, because it sounds like what a ninja does. You know, it was really a case of having my mind's eye of a stereotype of what one of these characters would look like and finding skills that sort of broadly fit into that class's playstyle.
What is your favorite class and your least favorite class that you created?
Very hard one to answer. I suppose probably my least favourite, because I kind of almost wish it wasn't in there, is the demigod, and that's mostly because it can go to the absolute max level and everything and ends up so obscenely overpowered that, you know, you don't have to be very good at the game to kill endgame bosses by yourself. Now, I put it in there because, I mean, some of my children play the game, and they're not very good. They're quite young and they kind of struggle with it. So I wanted a class in there that meant that everyone could get quite a long way through the game without needing to party up with other people. But it's too easy to sort of fall into the temptation of grabbing one, and then you end up basically playing vanilla Terraria that's overpowered. My favourite class is probably the ninja, and I can't quite put my finger on why. It's not as powerful as the wizard. The specialist mage is probably the most powerful class in the game. It gets really very powerful, but there's something fun about just throwing ninja stars at everyone, you know. I made sure they were craftable as well, because otherwise you can run a bit short of ninja ammo. But there's something about sort of, you know, running off, shooting, throwing knives at everybody and then going off and hiding again with this insane amount of speed that just appeals to me.
What was your process of balancing the amount of experience you got?
Trial and error, mostly playing through it. I mean, I had a few ideas of sort of algorithms that would semi-balance, and I figured that one of the best ways of balancing it was made sure that as you progressed through the game, as your level went up, the sorts of levels of monsters you had to fight to gain any more experience had changed too. So if you're fighting early game monsters when you're level 0, you'll gain loads of experience for them. If you're fighting them when you're level 25, then you'll gain almost nothing. So really, your progress is capped at how far through the game you've got. The idea being that it keeps sort of linearly going up through to the end game.
Have you ever considered adding new monsters for people to fight?
I have. It's always a tricky one. I mean, there's lots of ideas I had that never came to fruition and may or may not happen now. We will have to see. I've got a few ideas around what I'm going to do after the 1.2 update. The problem with doing monsters is I'm an anal perfectionist, really, and they have to be right. I don't want to just design an idea of a monster, make a picture for it, and then not animate it. I mean, that's no criticism to some of the people who have done that very successfully. I mean, some of Omnia's monsters are non-animated, but they're still great fun to fight. It's just, I know I'd end up being permanently frustrated, and I could probably sink 80% of my time over a few months into just doing 1 or 2 mobs, and I'd actually, looking back at how I spent my time previously, I think if I'm going to go through it again, I'm going to make sure more of my time is spent on making the mechanics interesting, having skills, perks, traits, that kind of thing.
Do you have any content updates coming anytime soon?
Not now. I mean, I sort of returned to it with the idea of getting multiplayer working properly, fixing a couple of the ongoing bugs, and basically having a stable release that I could work on. And no sooner did I come back onto the forums that I start seeing these rumours about 1.2, and it's like, oh, I've heard all those before, it's all nonsense. And then you dig into it and realise it's not nonsense, and you think, oh, for goodness sake. Because you know that at the end of it all, you're going to have to start all over again, basically, especially being a source mod. I can't hope to plug it in when tconfig gets updated, although it sounds like most tconfig mods are going to be in the same boat. They're actually going to need to be, if not completely rewritten, then at least reworked quite heavily. So I'm basically sitting on it and doing absolutely nothing until 1.2 comes out. It sounds a bit odd, but I'm actually quite disappointed with a lot of parts of Toparia. It was like I sort of half did a lot of the things I wanted to do, and it never quite ended up where I wanted it to be. So from the very beginning, I'm going to have race selection and class selection. I'm going to have stats. I'm going to have abilities. I'm going to have things that start to feel like the character you've picked from the beginning. I think one of the things that I've always loved about hack and slash role-playing games, ones with skill tree progressions, anything like that, is the character starts to feel like it's your own, if that makes sense. You've designed it, you've got cosmetic design on Terraria by default, but that's basically it. I want you to feel more attached to your character, like you know where it's going, you know where it's come from, you've got this idea of in your head of what he looks like, how he hits things, you know, is he some crazy berserking orc, is he some, you know, shady little ninja somewhere. It's something which I think adds to people's game experience, even if it doesn't do much more than make them feel more attached to what they're doing in the game. So I think if I get back to doing it after 1.2, it's going to be a sort of redesigned the way I wanted it to be originally. Now I know what I'm doing a bit better.
Have there been any features that you wanted to add but you couldn't?
Yeah, lots. I mean, the list is endless. I mean, part of the biggest problem I've had is time. It really is quite difficult to conceptualize how long it takes to implement some of these ideas to someone who doesn't do coding. I mean, one of the ideas I really wanted to do was like little pocket dungeons where you'd get to a point where you could unlock one of various difficulty levels, you might find like a portal sort of naturally spawning in the caves, and you go through it and you'd have like a sort of one-off dungeon experience, maybe a boss, maybe some loot, and then you go back to the main world and you keep exploring until you find another one. And then you realize you've got to sprite virtually every single new mob, perhaps a few terrain types, you've got to code some dungeon generation from scratch, you've got, if there's a boss monster, what's his AI going to be? He wants to be a bit different, otherwise you're doing the same thing. So it just escalates and escalates, and you can put 1,000 hours of programming time into doing what ends up being a fairly small part of your game. So I think that's one of the reasons I want to step back from some of the content ideas and monster ideas and focus more on individualizing different characters types and making them reasonably balanced. I'm going to be honest, I'm not aiming for complete balance here, because games like NetHack, plenty of games out there that really are not at all well balanced, are still great fun to play. You just play with the sort of character you want to play at the challenge level you want to play at and enjoy yourself. There is a bit of an issue when it comes to multiplayer, because obviously you don't want one or two people with this crazy character that just overpowers everyone else. But with that aside, it's not going to be aimed towards total balance, just interesting play styles. Ideally, I want to create 20 play styles that are all viable, all noticeably different and all fun to play.
Have you been following the 1.2 updates?
On and off. I mean, I've seen most of the trailer and teaser videos, and hats off to them. I just don't know quite how they managed to creative ideas, some of which are almost entirely sort of cosmetic, look so much fun. There's the waterfalls, there's colouring of walls, there's a little bit in there for everyone, it seems, and it also, from what I gather, looks like they're working towards a sort of more finalised content. You feel like you've done the game with an end boss. This hard mode dungeon thing sounds interesting. It certainly captured my attention more than I had figured it was going to do. And it also looks like there's enough in there that I'll be probably playing through the whole thing again with a hardcore character, because that's all I tend to play these days, and seeing how it plays out before I sort of pick up Toparia again.
Very cool. And I got a few questions from Twitter here. Is there anyone in the modding community that has helped you out that you maybe want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I mean, there's one person more than anyone, because his help with graphics, his help with just there being around chatting has been immense, and also he's been let down a bit by me, because there's a couple of projects I've tried to work on with him and I've just ran out of time. Although it sounds like he's found his feet from where he is from where he is now, which is Flebas, who's just been an amazing part of the community. The other one, whose contributions on the coding scene I think just simply cannot be understated, is Yorai, who's not only got the competence for it, but is genuinely helpful in his own inimitable style. He's actually incredibly good at picking up on, a new person trying out modding for the first time, and there you go, he pops up and helps. So there's undeniably some members of the community who have been personally helpful and have clearly made a difference to everyone else. Obviously SurfPup with tconfig, and some of the maps. I mean, you did Tim's map the other day on one of your earlier videos, and I've never tried it. I hate to say it, I haven't actually gone and done it, but it's something which I've really wanted to do. It's something I tend not to do, because most of these sort of story-driven one-off things tend not to be all that replayable, so I tend not to do them, but it's something I've wanted to do, and a lot of people enjoy it, a lot of people value the contributions, so I think there's a lot to be said for his work as well. I mean, really, it's a great community with a lot of contributors. I could go on for a long time if I named everyone, but those are probably the main ones.
When you sat down to start this, did you have a goal in mind, or did you just kind of take it one step at a time?
When I started it, all I wanted to do was learn C#. Then I started deciding how I could make Terraria better, and I thought classes and different play styles. And then by the time I'd actually released that, I just had so many ideas. It was a matter of just putting them in priority. New NPCs I wanted, because I decided it'd be nice to have a bigger village that you could sort of make your own. For some reason I had this weird idea that the more you had the better, and it really just came from every time I sort of decided, if only this game had this, it immediately went on the to-do list as something to do as soon as I got round to it. So it evolved. My ideas evolved far quicker than the mod did.
If you had to put just a ballpark idea, how many hours do you think you've spent working on this?
I haven't got a clue. Less than some of the other. I mean, without any doubt, Omnia and Tim have put more hours into their work on Terraria than I have, or their Terraria content than I have. And most of my limitations has been time. I mean, typically speaking, the hours I would spend working on it would start at 11 p.m. and end at 3 a.m. So it all depends on what else is going on in life, and whether I need sleep and all these other things that sort of bundle into it. And I suspect my schedule will be pretty similar when I pick up again. It will be those same sort of hours. So there's only so much you can do. I mean, that's 20 hours a week. Even if I did it every single day, every week for basically a year, it's still only 1,000 hours. And I know some of these guys have put in more time than that. So less than other people, but more than I can remember having counted up to.
Well, just on a personal note, I want to say thank you for creating this. It added an entirely new dimension that was so cool, and I think it was something that a lot of people were really dying to have in this game. So thank you for all the effort and time you put into it.
No problem at all. Thank you for doing the interviews. It was a great idea of yours.
Alright guys, that is going to do it for this video. If you have anybody you might want to hear talk about their mod or their adventure map, just leave their name down in the comments below. So that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. And until next time, see you guys.